Hello and welcome to Rogue Voice, Conversations that Inspire and Connect. I'm Tiffany Cooper.
I'm Jessica Gomez. We all know how important our health is, but I think we take it for granted, and it's not till something happens and we start not feeling so good that we realize, hey, maybe it's time to work on this. And that happened to me. I was 23 years old. At that point, you don't think anything can go wrong with you. And I started feeling tired, exhausted. Finally found out that I had hypothyroidism. And I went to the doctor and she tested me. She said, here's a prescription, come back in 3 months.
Oh my God.
That was it. And it wasn't until years later, I'm talking like probably 5 or 6 years later, after feeling crappy, that I finally found a doctor that was willing to put the effort in to try to better understand what was happening in my body. So
wow, that's really interesting. My father had chronic hiccups, and there's no cure for chronic hiccups. And so he went to the Mayo Clinic, and because the doctor at home was not able to help him. And so the Mayo Clinic was great because they use integrative therapies that really was successful. So, health and education is so important. But to help us explore ways to better fight disease and improve our overall health and longevity, we have two very accomplished doctors joining us today. Please let me introduce Dr. Dawn Lemanne, MD, Director, Oregon Integrative Oncology, and Dr. Deborah Gordon, MD, Northwest Memory Center. Welcome both to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tiffany.
yes, welcome to the show. We are so glad to have you here and help us kind of explore this topic. I think each of us has our own sort of set of stories, either a family member or some way that, a medical condition has sort of touched our lives. And we all want to have, I think, a better experience when it comes to our own health. It's just such an important issue. I'd like to begin with you, Dr. Lemanne. There's been some, differences in language about, whether or not we're doing integrative medicine and things like that. Could you explain the difference between integrative oncology, functional oncology, complementary medicine? I think that would be really helpful.
Sure. These are really important words, and they're also somewhat confusing, and there's a long history behind the labeling of various medical traditions. But the most important thing to remember is that there are always traditions that are a little bit edgy, and over time, as we figure out scientifically which parts of those traditions actually are helpful and which parts aren't, the helpful parts are moved into what's considered conventional or mainstream medicine. So the goal of all of these traditions is to help a person. Complementary medicine is thought of, it's a little bit of a dated term now, but basically it means something that adds to the conventional part of things. It complements it rather than replaces it. Alternative medicine often means something that replaces conventional or mainstream medicine. So those are complementary and alternative medicine are not really the same thing. Integrative medicine is a way of taking anything from any tradition, including conventional or alternative approaches, that seems to be helpful. And then there's functional medicine, which has its own philosophical basis. And I think Dr. Gordon can speak to this a little bit better than I can. But basically, the idea that disease starts with lifestyle, especially the gut, and fixing that first will improve general health. So I like to think of myself as practicing medicine that takes whatever is going to be helpful for that particular patient and puts it into a package. So it truly integrates all sorts of treatments and treatment styles and philosophies. And then we use conventional measurements, usually because conventional medicine has developed these measurements. They're good at that, to see if we're making headway and getting to the place where we want to be with our treatment goals for that patient getting better.
Ooh, wow, that's great. Do you just want to piggyback on what you just said? Do you where do you see the medicine going? I mean, in the future, I mean, in terms of, because medicine is constantly evolving, just like technology, in terms of information and new, you know, testing.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Tiffany. So I see the future as being very exciting, and I'm watching space. I'm looking to outer space to get some clues as to where our medicine will go.
Ah.
And what I mean by that is new devices, you know, that are being made that Jessica is involved in. These kinds of devices will allow people to measure various parts of their health at home and transmit that information directly to their doctors. So that's what needs to happen in outer space. If there's no doctor on board and you're up there for a long time, well, you better be able to take care of a lot of things yourself. And that's going to require new technology and small technology. So I think that's a big part of the future of medicine. And another thing that's just as important is that patients will become more and more involved, and patients will be doing a lot of the work of getting well. And I mean that in a good way, not that doctors are going to sit back and say, oh, well, you know, take care of yourself. What are you calling me for? It means that doctors and patients will form a much tighter team than we have in the past. And patients are already so well educated, and they come in with wonderful ideas that they've found themselves. And I think more and more doctors, we're happy about that. We can't read everything. So the last time I checked, there were 20,000 new oncology papers every 3 weeks.
Wow.
And I admit I'm not going to be reading all of those. So, you know, if a patient comes in with something that they found interesting, I want to know about it if they think it pertains to their care. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But it's certainly helpful if patients are out there scouting as well. So I think those are two really big changes coming.
Wow, that's great. I mean, that's so hopeful that you can have that kind of relationship with your doctor. So, Dr. Gordon, I want to ask you, could you talk a little bit about the 4 key personal health elements you emphasize in your private practice and in your personal life?
Yeah, and I want to say one thing to tag on to what Dr. Lemanne said, and everything she said I agree with, and I have at different times called my practice complementary, integrative. I think both of us walk a line that is edging into the 21st century as responsibly as we can, and also looking back to our distant past, because some of the truths about human nature and biology come from evolution. And that's something that's not going to change. Our insights about it change. But my principles in medicine are rooted strongly in the past, and I'm looking ahead to the future and trying to get those together. So in keeping with that, my principles are, how do I take the kind of human life that a human evolved to have and manifest it in the modern world? So I care a lot about what I eat. And I think everyone should, you know, what you put in your body becomes your body. And I'd say that's vaguely a paleo kind of diet without extra sugars and grains. And one of the things about diet is, you know, what you eat, what you don't eat, and something I learned from Dr. Lemanne, when you eat and when you don't eat. So based on insights from her work with cancer, I've incorporated a 13 to 15 hour overnight fast every night. You just don't have ice cream after dinner, you know, you just have your dinner, spend your evening, go to bed, you're not really hungry anyway, and you wake up in the morning. And from my point of view, your body and your brain have done a really good cleansing overnight. But that's only if you've also gotten a good night's sleep. So that, I would say, is one of the 4 pillars I count on. I eat well, I sleep well, I work hard, and I do that both with physical exercise and trying to keep my brain. And in both areas, I think we have to be honest with ourselves, and just the same way we'd ask a doctor to consult on our thyroid labs, Jessica, that we would ask a trainer or a coach to look at how we're using our body, make sure we're doing it right. And we might do some brain games on the computer. So we do some brain work that's not familiar to us, that's asking us to do something that's out of our comfort zone.
That's really interesting. I totally agree, and especially the overnight fast. I find that if I have dinner too early, it's harder. So if I eat dinner at 5 o'clock, that fast, I don't go to bed until 10:30, 11. That's almost impossible for me not to want to have an apple or orange or something. But if I eat dinner between 6:30 and 7:30, then that's manageable.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the fasting, because then I wake up hungry, and I don't want to wake up starving. I want to wake up where I can, feel okay. I can have my oatmeal, not like I'm opening up the cupboard and,
Yeah,
like not starving, because so I've learned that when you eat your dinner, for me, makes a difference. I can't have dinner at 4 or 5 o'clock and then fast going to bed at 10:30 or 11.
so I would take it. Didn't your grandmother tell you that your beauty sleep is all the hours you sleep before midnight?
Oh,
So you look like you go to bed at 6 p.m. by your appearance.
Oh, wow. Wow. And I'm way in my 50s, so that's great. I'm trying to really hold myself together.
You're doing great. But I treated myself at my last birthday to a little sleep present. It's called the Aura Ring, and it measures the different stages of sleep, so I can see if I'm getting enough deep sleep, and I know that's when my brain and body are doing its house cleaning. And if you eat too close to dinner, you will not get good sleep as a measure. Eat too close to bedtime. So eating dinner late enough so you can make it the full 3 hours or so before dinner, before bedtime, not eating right before bed, and you'll get better sleep and wake up beautiful in the morning.
Sleep. Yeah, get that REM sleep.
Can you comment a little bit? I heard you talk briefly just about sugar and the impact of sugar on your body. And in our house, so I have 2 kids. They're 5 and 9. And when my 9-year-old is really, we don't keep a lot of stuff, but I notice her really continuing to go back for the sugar. I'm wondering, what are some of the things that people can do to kind of stave off that craving? Because I feel like once you start, it's really tough to prevent yourself from going back for that quick energy, right? The fruit or the extra chocolate or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think that's evolutionary built into our systems, because historically, hundreds of thousands of years ago, the only sweet we had was fruit, and it was only available in the summertime. And we used it to make more body fat so that we could survive the winter. So it's right that it precipitates a craving for more of itself. The antidote to our modern life, where you can have sugar 24/7, I'd be interested in hear what Dr. Lemanne has confronted with, what tools she uses, because I know both of us encourage our patients to eat less sugar. And my current go-to is to have them have more protein. So for instance, Tiffany, I think it'd really be better for you to have eggs in the morning. And if you love your oatmeal, I'd say have 2 or 3 eggs first. And then if you want oatmeal, maybe you could have a little oatmeal. But that oatmeal, which is sugar, following protein, I think that's the best way to give yourself some satiety so you don't overeat sugar. Dr.
So
Lemanne,
what about oatmeal, like a half a cup of oatmeal with half a cup of protein shake?
your body really likes you to chew your food.
Okay.
I've got I'm called at home the spoiler, because I actually have an opinion about everything.
I love that. That's why you're here.
So since you asked, I think you should chew your protein, and unless you eat a lot of liver, eggs are the only way you can get choline, which is a really crucial micronutrient to fuel your brain.
Wow.
So maybe I'll have some hard-boiled eggs. I'll do hard-boiled eggs or egg whites or something.
No, the yolks are where the choline is. The yolks are the best part. You could skip the white if you want to.
I love the white.
You're learning so much, Tiffany. This is great. I love it.
And I'm getting this. I love it. Because you've been told to eat the oatmeal, and it doesn't spike my blood sugar up like some people. They eat oatmeal and it. I just with no sugar or anything on it, just like nuts and maybe blueberries or something. But yeah, that's great. I used to do 1 egg and an oatmeal because I needed that carbohydrate. I'm doing like a really intense workout.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Certain kinds of workouts If I do a really, really long, steady row, I don't feel like I need a lot more carbs, but if I'm racing, I always replenish with carbs. So if you're doing that hard workout, I would agree, carbs are probably a smart thing to help you recover from that workout.
Yeah. Wow. That is great. So Dr. Lemanne, I want to ask you, what can someone do at home to improve the effectiveness of conventional cancer treatment or to prevent cancer in the first place?
Sure. So I'm a cancer specialist. I treat patients with cancer. I use medications to do that. And one of the things that I want people to know is that how you behave at home during your cancer treatment program really has a big impact on how well that treatment program works. And things that you can do really cost very little or even nothing. So as Dr. Gordon mentioned, the 13-hour overnight fast is imperative. I have all my patients who've been diagnosed with cancer fast every night for 13 hours. And I also recommend, as Dr. Gordon does, that they have 3 hours between supper and bedtime. And I do encourage an earlier supper. I like people to finish their supper by 6:30, something like that, and make sure that there's at least that 3 hours between supper and bedtime. And what's really interesting is that the 13 hours is very much better than 12 hours. 12 hours seems to not be enough. Something happens to there's a shift in our metabolism between 12 and 13 hours of fasting that you really need to get that benefit. So when you think, oh, well, I'll fast for 12 hours, well, I guess that's better than 11, but 13 is really where you start to move the needle, at least for cancer recurrence. And I also recommend that people who want to prevent cancer make sure that they have a 13-hour overnight fast their entire life. In other words, getting rid of the bedtime snacking is really important. When patients are actually on heavy-duty chemotherapy, I might recommend something like a 48-hour water fast, meaning no calories at all for 48 hours during the time of the exact time of their chemotherapy infusion. So, but that's a very specialized co-treatment that you'd want to do with your doctor if you're on chemotherapy. Having said that, if you don't have cancer and you want to prevent it, 24 or 48-hour water fast once or twice a month is probably one of the best things you can do throughout your entire adult life. Children shouldn't do this. And if you are an adult and you want to do this, just check with your doctor to make sure you don't have any contraindications. But if you don't, it's one of the safest and most effective ways as far as animal studies and such research in animals shows to prevent cancer and also other diseases of aging. So I think that, thinking about not eating at particular times and moments in life, with 13 hours overnight, perhaps once or twice a month, 24 to 36 to 48 hours without any calories for a normal person. Thinking about doing those things, which is absolutely free, doesn't cost anything, will be important for a lot of people in terms of preventing cancer. So if somebody's at high risk of cancer because they have a family history, that's really something to consider, and that's something that can absolutely be done, and it's very powerful. There are no drugs that we know of that can match the cancer prevention or cancer risk reduction abilities of fasting.
Wow, that's great. So I have a viewer question here, and this is for Dr. Gordon. If you could tell people one food to avoid, what would that be for overall health?
I think the one food I would have people avoid is anything in the category. So, I'm sort of tempted to say sugar, but those blueberries are so good for you. I'm not going to say that. The one food category that I'd have people avoid would be vegetable oils. So that's corn, soy, safflower, sunflower, and even the health food darling of the modern world, canola oil. Avoid all of those. The few nutrients that they have, we get from all the other foods that we eat so richly. And they deplete so many other valuable substances in our body and you have to be careful when you go to a restaurant. That's one reason I'll always have grilled meat or fish at a restaurant, because then they haven't fried it in that oil. So,
wow.
Vegetable oils.
Thank you. All right, so we have we just on a roll here. We have another audience question, and this is for you, Dr. Lemanne. are these fad diets healthy? Keto, paleo, Atkins, South Beach, etc. Can you explain what direction should we go in? This is viewer asking.
So that is a not even one whole podcast. That's about 100 podcasts. So the answer to what should I eat, which is a real question, and I applaud the listener for asking this question, and I'm not making fun of this question at all. I think it should be asked and it should be answered carefully. So the way that I answer that question is, there are some principles that we can put in place. If you are eating a lot of carbohydrates and your body cannot tolerate those, you are going to get ill. We can measure how well your body is able to tolerate carbohydrates, and we can do this at home with a with a finger stick. So my patients call me Dracula, because I'm always asking them to prick their finger and check their blood sugar, their blood ketone levels, those kinds of things, because I want to know very precisely how their diet is working for them. So my answer to that question is, you need a diet that keeps your blood sugar low all day long. You need a diet that keeps your weight stable and in a healthy range. You need a diet that supports a vigorous exercise program. And you need a diet that supports sleep and good inflammatory profiles. So if your diet is doing all of those things, we can see it on paper. And so you would enlist someone like Dr. Gordon to check those things for you with blood tests, and you would learn also how to do those measurements at home, so that you know immediately that meal, if that meal was good for you or bad for you, if that meal is killing you or if it's
shutting you down,
growing a nice new body.
So I heard you mention inflammation. And so Dr. Gordon, in your practice, you talk a lot about that, and then sugar brain, and it sounds like you do some work in memory health. Can you talk about how sugar and the food we eat really sort of impacts the overall brain function, and how inflammation interacts with those things that we eat, and how that impacts the brain? I mean, I hear a lot of these, anti-inflammatory diets. People are talking a lot about, cutting out wheat and other things, oils. Give us a sense of, what that looks like.
I think the trick to remember about sugar, and this speaks to really the finger poking that Dr. Lemanne was just talking about, is that sugar's a great fuel for your brain. And it's the one most of us use from the time we've been weaned from our mother's milk until we're a certain age. It would be great if you could just drip it right into the cells of your brain or the cells of your muscles. But sugar comes with a catch, which is insulin. And insulin's a hormone, and hormones are proteins we manufacture in our bodies, and they go to work somewhere else. And insulin chaperones sugar and lets it into all the cells of our body where it can work as fuel. The things about our bodies is they're kind of like children who have a messy room, and if you tell them over and over and over again to clean their room, they stop listening to you. So your body stopped listening to insulin. So like an angry mother, insulin raises its voice, and you have a lot more insulin because you've eaten a lot more sugar over your life. And that a little bit has to do with blood sugar spikes, like Dr. Lemanne was talking. If you eat a meal and your blood sugar goes up to 180, that'll make a lot of insulin. But even something healthy like oatmeal, which might only have it up to 110 or 120, but it stays up for several hours, that might raise your insulin without ever really spiking your blood sugar. So you kind of have to check. Insulin is a valuable hormone for growth and for allowing us to use sugar. But beyond that, it's a home wrecker. It's inflammatory, and in the brains, it's literally litter. And at night when you're sleeping, the street sweeper comes out in the brain, and it wants to clean away all the debris, including any of the scar tissue or inflammation that might have built up in your brain over the day from something bad you ate or a car that flared its exhaust at you. But the first thing it will clear up is always leftover insulin. So the extent to which your sugar habit, and you're right, gets to be really habitual, has prompted an increase in your body's insulin levels, you're literally contributing to garbage in your brain that you're not going to be able to clear out overnight.
So is that part of the reason, Dr. Lemanne, that you recommend some of those long fasting? Does it relate to this at all? Because it seems like, I guess, when you're sleeping and then if you're not sort of refilling that your body with sugar and you don't have the insulin raise, right? That maybe that would be helpful.
That's exactly right. So research has shown that the long overnight fasting decreases the glycogen levels in the muscle. Mm-hmm. So glycogen is how our glucose is stored. It's stored and glycogen is stored in the muscles and in the liver. And so a long overnight fast allows the body to start dipping into the glycogen and kind of cleaning that out. It also lowers the blood sugar and therefore the insulin level. And insulin is a driver of cancer growth. So insulin is a driver of normal growth. So in childhood, insulin and insulin-like hormones, insulin-like growth factor, are very, very important. After you've finished growing, you really don't want to grow a lot of extra cells that can turn into cancer. And so you don't want to have a lot of insulin around, especially if you feel that you're at risk for cancer. So we know that a lot of common cancers are related to excess insulin secretion. Even if the patient is not overweight or diabetic, we still can measure their fasting insulin level and see if it's, high. And by high, I don't mean outside of what's considered the normal range, but is it ideal? And ideally, it's very, very low, in the low end of the normal range. Mm. So that is exactly right. You're exactly right. The long overnight fasts work by indirectly lowering the insulin level.
Wow. So eating protein first thing in the morning or after that 13-hour fast, that's what you really should be breaking your fasts with.
Protein, as Dr. Gordon mentioned, is very, very satiating. And also, there's some evidence that eating protein first thing in the morning sets your appetite thermometer a little bit lower. So you end up eating fewer calories. Our bodies like protein, they aim for a certain amount every day. And if you don't reach that amount pretty quickly, it may be, at least in some people, that the appetite is stimulated so that you end up eating a lot more calories than you would if you just naturally had some protein, especially earlier in the day.
I know, like for me, if I have like my Greek yogurt, sometimes it's just 20 grams of protein, then I'm set to go. I'll put some maybe berries and some nuts in there and I'm set to go. But I want to, this is our last question, and I want you both to answer this. So we'll start with you, Dr. Lemanne, since you're, last response. Do you have any tips for how a patient should build and collaborate their medical team from oncology medicine to functional medicine, alternative medicine, and traditional?
Sure. So oncology is part of traditional medicine. So that's conventional medicine. And the first person to put on the team is the patient. The patient should be active and involved in the medical decisions and should be, to their ability, looking at options, and doesn't mean that you have to be doing experiments or even reading the medical literature, but you do need to be asking questions. And any question that comes to your mind is not a dumb question, and ask it. You want people on your team that make sense to you. You need someone to help you with exercise. Exercise is part of the medicine. You need diet. You need to make sure that if you're having pain issues or sleep issues, you deal with those and get someone on your team who can help you with those. And again, if you don't feel that your doctor is really right for you, pay attention to that and change doctors. The chemistry of the doctor-patient relationship is part of the medicine. That's part of the treatment. And so you want that to be right too.
And piggyback off of that before we close out, Dr. Gordon?
I'll just add one other person to that team because I agree entirely with putting the team together that way. I think it's really important to find somebody who does hands-on medicine that works for you. And the one that's been written up the most in the medical journals is chiropractic. I happen to be a fan of osteopathic hands-on medicine. Maybe a massage therapist is whom you like the best. But in this world where we're going and so busy and carrying so much on our shoulders, it's good to have somebody who can help you recover from what you carry and recover from that hard workout that you did in the morning.
Oh, I love that.
That is excellent. Oh, wow. I want to thank you, Dr. Gordon and Dr. Lemanne, for such a great conversation and for sharing with us some of your knowledge and expertise. And I'm sure our listeners appreciated all the tips just as much as Jessica and I. So remember to tune in to Rogue Voice Online every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and connect with us on our YouTube channel and Facebook, where you can send us a message or leave a comment. We want to hear from you. So next week, we'll be talking about STEM and education. So tune in. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.